Little Rock has probably changed the most, as have I, because I myself in real life and Little Rock went through puberty. And so we are a little bit older now, and we are adults. But no, Little Rock is now 10 years older. And so she's kind of in this, like any, late teen girl. She wants to be rebellious, and she wants to go out and find a boy, which is pretty slim pickings in Zombieland. And so, there's a little bit of her acting out and I guess trying to push the boundaries with Tallahassee because, as much as they have such an amazing bond in the first movie and in the second movie, they have become like a family in the past 10 years. So she's kind of going through that I don't want to be a little girl anymore type phase, which I think bothers Tallahassee a little bit. When we first start Zombieland 2, it starts off with the four of us, the original foursome, just basically doing what they're best at, killing zombies. And we've now taken up residence in the White House, which seems like a pretty safe space for us. And it's also like, who wouldn't want to live in the White House, it's basically just shows us in the past 10 years, we've been all each other has had. So, you kind of get that sense of us being a real family. What I like about the script for Zombieland 2, I think that it's great that, Paul and Rhett took, these 10 years and they really worked so hard on it because it's, I think it was important to everybody who was on the original film that it still had that really unique quality from the original film, and it was still quirky and, not really a typical zombie movie. And so this one is basically has all those same elements, but it's just bloodier, gorier, more action-packed, and in some ways even a lot funnier. So I think it's just like Zombieland 2, but Zombieland 2.0, like, boom.
He's sort of the opposite of Tallahassee. He's like, he's a pacifist. He doesn't believe in violence or of any kind or guns or whatever. So he's sort of like the opposite of Tallahassee and probably the opposite of anything that is probably going to keep you alive. Shockingly, he has remained alive. I don't know why. Through his song, let's say. Although that would have just attracted zombies to him. I don't know. He made it for some reason, and he gets picked up by Little Rock and Wichita, and then he kind of like tries to explain to Little Rock about like pacifist ideas and the ideas of nonviolence in a world full of zombies, because that makes a lot of sense. And Little Rock sort of listens, sort of, but she's still Little Rock, so. She likes her guns. Yeah. Yeah, I think that the thing that makes this different than all the other zombie things that are out there is that it's aware of itself. It knows the genre so well that it can play with the genre and play around with the tropes within the genre. And it's just got a really stellar cast. Like, everyone's so talented, and everyone's like, firing on all cylinders and very funny, completely funny. And so that I think ultimately makes it quite different than other zombie things. It's just funny, There's zombie stuff got so serious, and I like my serious zombie stuff, but it's every once in a while you need to take a step back and like have more of a funnier outlook on that kind of like horror, zombie thing. So I think that does this well. I'm surprised by how sentimental it is. You know, it's very funny, but it's like really got a lot of heart, and the characters and their relationships that have evolved since the original, and it talks about like some really kind of complicated relationship stuff. You know, actually, rather than like comedies that sort of like kind of skirt around that sort of thing. Like we have our big moments of like people getting together, or people coming together, and it's really, I think it's really rewarding, to see these characters that we loved in the first film, and like sort of like, really find out that the family and their family together is really the centerpiece of the movie.
Ten years later, they're still a family unit. They're at the beginning of the movie, we see them kind of move into the White House because the White House is abandoned. So we find them there, and as the years have gone on, zombies have evolved a bit. There's a group of zombies that have kind of evolved and are much, much harder to deal with. So they're learning this sort of new landscape of the zombies, and some of the rules that used to work don't work as well anymore, Columbus's rules. And they're also sort of, struggling with dynamics between them. Like Little Rock was 12 in the last one, and now she's 22, so she's really wanting to kind of break out of the nest and be free and become an adult and be treated like an adult. And Wichita is still kind of wanting to be a lone wolf, even though she's been in sort of a family and a relationship with Columbus for the past 10 years. So there's lots of fun to be had along the way. Plus, we get new characters, which is kind of exciting. Some of the new characters in this one are Madison, played by Zoey Deutch, who's just spectacular and very, very funny to a level that's a bit problematic because we're having a hard time shooting the scenes and not completely cracking up and having to redo them again. She sort of seems like a Paris Hilton-esque girl that wears a lot of pink, juicy tracksuits and puts on like a lot of hand lotion. So she's pretty hilarious. And then there's Berkeley, played by Avan Jogia, and he's a kind of like a hippie, very, granola sort of guy that's a pacifist that doesn't believe in violence, even in Zombieland. So all he really carries with him is a guitar to play other people's songs and call them his own. So, yeah. And then there's, more fun surprises too. Oh, there's Rosario Dawson. She's playing Nevada, which is a very fun moment in the film. And, other surprises too. I think the most important part of Zombieland, or the world of Zombieland, is the relationship between those four. I think it's really a story about making your own family. As it sounds a little bit heavy for a zombie comedy, a zomcom, as I like to call it. But I think like a deeper message, even in something like Zombieland, is that even when horrible things have happened or it feels like the world's falling apart, you do kind of create your family, and you do choose the people that you love and you want to stick with, and that's what these four people have done. Obviously, Little Rock and Wichita are sisters, but I think Columbus is really the kind of glue that holds the whole family together because he so desperately wants that family, and it's so important for all of them. And in that, you have big personalities and funny dynamics, but at the end of the day, I think it would be fun to watch those four people, whether there were zombies, running all over, or they were having to deal with the post-apocalypse, or if they were just, hanging out in the world as it is now. And, oh wait, it is a little bit like the post-apocalypse right now. Not in every way, but in some. Well, they'd be great anywhere.
Columbus is like a person who has survived this apocalypse through like his own logic rather than, you know, kind of like brute strength or luck. He's somebody who has like had, you know, he's like, you know, like what would like an average person do if they were thrown into this world? Like they would try to kind of, you know, if they're like, you know, like a smart, nervous, humble person, they would try to reason their way through it. And so that's what he's done. So, you know, all of his kind of like OCD and his you know, intense planning and attention to detail has allowed him to survive through this list of rules that he's created. So it's like, you know, he's like, I would say like he's an unlikely survivor of this world. But then, you know, as you learn about him, you realize, oh, this is like a kind of guy who might actually make it. So Abby's character meets this young guy who she is like attracted to, and they're heading to this kind of commune, Babylon, which is in coincidentally Atlanta. And so they're on the road and so we're kind of trying to follow them to find them because we hear about this new threat of like what we call like T-800 zombies, these like, you know, kind of like more evolved zombies that are more dangerous. And so we decide to go get her. And that turns into kind of like its own road trip. We wind up at this like kitschy Elvis hotel. And then there's this other like really great scene, like, because we're constantly trying to find a new car because we're driving this van that Woody is ashamed of. So we're constantly trying to find a new car. So we have like a fight over an RV with zombies, and we screw that up. And then we have a fight with these two like doppelganger characters over and we try to get their monster truck, and Woody can't drive that. So there's this kind of like comic repetition of us trying to find a car and constantly being stuck with this like mom van. The best sequence in the movie is when these two guys show up who are like doppelgangers of, you know, Columbus and Tallahassee. And so Columbus's guy is like superior in all ways, including that he has a list of commandments that are like they're far better and like more thoughtful than my rules. Like my first rule is cardio, and that's his like 29th commandment. And it's not cardio, it's cardiovascular like fitness, like it's a more like holistic approach to activity. And so like he just has like a superior, more well-reasoned list, and they're called commandments. They're more authoritative, and even like the graphics of his commandments are better than the graphics of my rules, which are kind of simple. And it's in my opinion, it's like the best sequence of the movie because it's like it's short-lived and contained, and it's so unbelievably creative.
My character's name is Albuquerque, and I show up with Thomas Middleditch, who's playing Flagstaff, and we kind of are doppelgangers for Woody and Jesse's character, and we enter the story and the scene by we're driving a monster truck called Big Fat Death that we stole from after the zombies hit one night in Dallas. We took it from a monster truck jam and we crushed the beast, the car that Woody and Jesse and Emma Stone use. And that's kind of how we make a rather dramatic entrance to the movie. Woody and I mean, I think probably in real life it helps that Woody's from Houston and I'm from Dallas, and maybe we kind of sound the same in that we're Texans, that we both wear black hats and have kind of long pistol-type guns and kind of have like a kind of a cowboy gunslinger vibe. And then Jesse's character and Thomas Middleditch are kind of more kind of these like intellectual kind of zombie hunter type guys that kind of are dressed the same and both kind of curly headed, you know, fast talking, kind of cerebral type characters. And yeah, he's kind of my right-hand man, and Woody has his right-hand man, and yeah, that just kind of strikes Emma Stone and Rosario Dawson when they see us together. They say it's, you know, like a guy looking in the mirror. I just think there's like an irreverence and a humor to this, and even like a sweetness at time, and kind of, you know, family and friendship aspects that maybe aren't in other, aren't in some of these other zombie projects that are cool in their own right. I mean, I think that's why there's so many kind of fans out there that are so fervent about them.
I definitely take Nevada to be a very independent and strong-willed person. I think that I could see her having owned a bar or some property and kind of running things. She's definitely got a boss kind of attitude. And I think she's well equipped for this new world of kind of just minding herself, taking care of herself, not counting on necessarily anybody else. I don't think she's particularly let down in this new world. And I think she finds a kindred spirit in Tallahassee, who's also someone who is just sort of just game for taking on life, you know, by the horns. And no matter what the dynamic or situation was, I think she's definitely found her stride in being self-sufficient in this space and making the best of it. She's got a lot of attitude and a lot of strength and can kind of come off a little standoffish, but I think it's just she's just protective of herself and but still just really spontaneous and present, you know? And I think so she kind of fits in pretty well with this crew. You know, they kind of just roll with the punches, something changes and, you know, I really liked you, but moving on. I think it's one of the things that I love so much about this zombie world is that it's not very precious, and folks are not, you know, just sort of sitting around complaining and whining about how things could be, but very much making the best of what it is and finding joy and fun where they can. People are going to love this movie no matter what, but I think what everyone put into it on a daily basis of just going, how can we make this funnier? How can we help each other? How can we support each other? Is just going to take it. I think people are going to feel like they got taken along on this ride as well.
When we find the core four of the movie, they've moved to Washington, D.C. Columbus tells us that Tallahassee is a theory, go big or go home. And so they go to the biggest home they can find, the White House, which is a really fun place to kind of situate them and see this unique opportunity that could only exist in a post-apocalyptic world. They've kind of made the White House their own home, so they've, you know, it doesn't look how we've always seen it. It has like their furniture. They've taken, you know, masterworks from the Smithsonian and covered the walls with Van Goghs and Herrings and other, you know, famous paintings. And they're living together happily as a family. Although there's some cracks kind of underneath the surface, and Wichita, who's always been kind of a rolling stone that gathers no moss, is having trouble adjusting to this more domestic life. Jesse's dream is just to have a home and be together, and that's all he kind of wants. But she's feeling a need to leave. And at the same time, Tallahassee's become this kind of overbearing father figure to Little Rock, who is no longer a 12-year-old and is now 22 and is kind of sick of just hanging out with old people and wants to find some friends her own age. Probably my favorite sequence in the film is that sequence where they meet Luke Wilson and Thomas Middleditch, who we cast because they bear sort of a resemblance to Jesse and Woody. Luke just came in guns blazing, so funny. He had really, thought a lot about the character and wanted to do kind of like a nod to Woody Harrelson, but not completely just do a parody of him or like an imitation. So he's like his own kind of macho cowboy guy. And then Thomas Middleditch, I think we cast in part because he and Jesse have a similar comic energy, that neurotic kind of nervous, but also very, very funny. Well, I think, having an amazing script as a starting point is always where you want to be, and the script was amazing. So I always feel really lucky if we just shot the script, I know that the movie would be good because it's so strong. But when you have performers like Jesse and Emma and Woody and Thomas Middleditch and Luke Wilson and Rosario and Abigail, they can elevate the material because they're incredible improvisers. They have amazing instincts as performers. And so I'll always shoot the script as written, but then indulge whatever the actors want to add, whether it's their own ideas. Sometimes I pitch jokes, but my jokes aren't usually very funny. But they just bring so much to it. And then like we were talking about, they all have a really close relationship off camera. And I think that informs it as well. Like there is this natural feeling they really are a family, but when you have 10 years of history of friendship between the actors, that can't help but inform the characters. The fact that, they're all friends allows for that chemistry and that shared history that it feels like the characters really have that same 10-year history too. And so that's one of the just amazing things of bringing us all back together, is to be able to have them inform the script and inform the characters with their own experience. And like I said, these are world-class improvisers, like some of the funniest people literally in the world: Jesse, Emma, Woody, Thomas, Luke, Rosario. And so they just build off what we have and just make it better than even what's on the page.
Albuquerque is a partner with Flagstaff, played by Luke Wilson, and we are doppelgangers of Jesse and Woody's characters. I mean, some are arguing, people are saying, they've already seen early cuts, but people are saying like, oh, those are the cooler versions of those dudes. I get it. Oh, this is what the movie could have been. People are saying. Whereas Woody and Jesse's characters are antagonistic, but friends. Flagstaff and Albuquerque are unabashedly affectionate with one another. They just get along. So in a weird way, they're like an example of what could be if things were just a little bit nicer. This was just one of those calls you get in Hollywood where they're like, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, oh, goodness, yes. And then I said, why me? And they said, didn't you know you're a poor man's Jesse Eisenberg? I said, what? I thought I was like my own like unique person, like with a perfectly like precious little gem to give to the entertainment industry that was entirely my own. And they said, dude, you're kidding yourself. Jesse was here first. You're just riding those coattails. Now get to work. And I had a good cry, and I did the film.
We've stuck true to real time, and it is 10 years later, and we are living at a place where, well, I guess if you could live in a nice house, maybe you'd live in the White House. So the whole gang is living in the White House together. Well, people always ask me, what movie was the most fun for you to make? And I think the first Zombieland was arguably, at least in the top 3 of the funnest movies I ever made. And this one I think is probably going to be the funnest because it's an incredible group of people. It's one of those things, it's hard to be in a bad mood. If you came to set in a bad mood, it's just going to flip eventually because everybody's so funny and so cool. And yeah, it's like going to work at a playground.
Madison is a fresh face in the land of zombies, and she is discovered in a mall fridge, and she is a positive beam of light in a world of darkness, is the non-judgmental way of describing her. Her circumstances of her survival, she was living in a freezer in a mall, and I think her weapons of choice were her nails and mace. So, I mean, she survived for 10 years, so she has to have some wits about her, I believe. But I'm particularly defensive of Madison. Madison is the complete opposite of Wichita. Everything that Wichita is, Madison isn't.